Good evening. Welcome to the Central Pennsylvania World War II Roundtable. My name is Bill Bridenstine. I am the treasurer and one of the newer board members. It's a nice turnout tonight. We have a very special guest this evening, U.S. Navy PT boat veteran Charles Brooking, who is kind enough to help us this evening to start off and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I have a few announcements to make, a few housekeeping things. Please be kind enough to mute or turn off your cell phone during the presentation. Also, you saw coming in, we have a book table in the lobby, and a lot of good reads there for a small donation goes toward the club. And also, as you leave this evening, we have what we are calling the Helmet Committee. So any donations you care to make help support the organization and provide the programs such as this evening. And also, I always like to ask all of the World War II veterans among us to stand or raise their hands so we can recognize them this evening. Thank you very much for your service. I also like to recognize all veterans of the armed forces as well. If you could stand or raise your hand, we appreciate that. Very good. So without further ado, I wanted to make a brief introduction of our special guest this evening. Charles Brooking, who many of you may know already, I would imagine. He was born in 1927 and born and raised in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. His dad actually had to sign off for him to go into the military at the age of 17 in early 1944. During the war, Charles was a gunner's mate second class. He served on several PT boats during World War II. PT 223 was the one he served on most extensively, the last being PT 617. Charles had very fond memories of his fellow crew members saying that we were like family. Most of the PT boat patrols were at night, and Charles served primarily in the Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal. One recollection, he shot down a Japanese Zero fighter plane with his twin 50 caliber machine guns. He had used the firing technique of the following, the tracer bullets. Charles served 2 years of active service in the Navy and later 8 years in the Navy Reserve. Charles and his wife Dot married in 1948. They were married for 70 years before her passing in 2019. Charles was also a civilian pilot, earning his license. He enjoys fishing, and also worked most of his career in a print shop for some 39 years. He was also a restaurant owner, I understand. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that the last boat on which he served, the PT 617, is on display at the Battleship Cove America's Fleet Museum in Fall River, Massachusetts. So I'll stop talking, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Charles Brooking.
Thank you. As he said, I was born and raised in Bloomsburg. I had a brother, and I had a sister. They're both deceased. My father worked in the silk mills at that time, and he worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he got $27 every 2 weeks. We lived on $13.50 a week. We had a huge garden, which supplied us with enough vegetables and other odd products, that we made our own sauerkraut, so that would last us over the winter until the next summer when we would plant the garden again. In 1941, when the war started, Pearl Harbor was attacked, I wasn't old enough to join the service yet. So in late 1943, I decided I wanted to get in the service to help win the war, because we didn't know which way at that time, which way the war was going. And my mother, she wasn't real happy about the fact that I wanted to join the service, because there was a war going on and a lot of my classmates at school had already been killed. But they finally agreed to let me go. So we took a Greyhound bus, my father and I, and went to Wilkes-Barre. I was going to join the Marine Corps because I heard the only news we got about the war was either in the newspaper, on what radio service we had. We had a little Philco radio. There was no television at that time, remember. And in the movies, you would see the newsreels of the war that was going on. So I wanted to join the Marine Corps, but my father was never in service. He was too old at that time to enlist, and he said, I want to ask you something before you go into the recruiter station. He said, the way I see it on the newsreels and pictures in the paper, where do the Army and Marines usually spend their time while they're fighting? He said, in a foxhole. And usually there's water in that foxhole. And he said, the way I hear it, he said, in the Navy, you have a dry bunk, and you usually have 3 square meals a day. So I joined the Navy. I didn't know what PT boats was. I didn't, in fact, other than the newsreels, I never saw any Navy ships. But in boot camp in Sampson, New York, they asked me, what type of ship do you want to serve on? I said, a small ship. Still not knowing what a PT boat was. After I got out of boot camp, they sent me to Boston, Massachusetts, to the Armed Guard Center. And I was to wait up there for other crew members to arrive. Still not knowing what a PT boat was. And after the crews came to man the boats, we went through some classes there. I taught semaphore on the roof of the Boston Armed Guard Center. And we were sent to Melville, Rhode Island. As soon as we got into Melville, I saw one PT boat in dry dock. And I looked at that thing and I thought, that's made out of wood. Well, that's not a whole lot bigger than the boats I used to fish with. And Oh, but it was good choice that I made. PT boats started their life upside down. Higgins, Huckins, and Elko in Bayonne, New Jersey, Elko manufactured most of the PT boats. But while they were upside down, they took six-inch planks of mahogany plywood and they covered the whole bottom and sides of the PT boat. Then they would take glue and they would cover the whole outside with glue, and then they would put a second layer of 6-inch planks of mahogany plywood. So it was like this. So it would take up a lot of stress. And that was all held together with 400 brass screws. That's a lot of screws. Can anybody here tell me why they would use brass screws? Well, one reason they don't corrode, and you can't pick brass up with a magnet. The Germans, Japanese, and the Americans, we all had magnetic mines. The bigger ships that are made out of metal, if they got close to a magnetic mine, it would attach and blow up. We could get real close to them, and with the help of the brass screws, we would get it. Although we had 2 PT boats that actually run into a mine, and we lost them. They blew up. Then they put they turned the boat over, which was a process, and then they would put the deck on it, the pilot house steering it. Where you steered the boat, PT boat, was on the outside. You were never inside. And they finished the boat off, and my gun turret was about this big around, about that high. That was made out of plywood too. We had no metal protection of any kind on a PT boat. We had 3 Packard engines, 1,250 plus horsepower, which were supercharged. We carried 3,000 gallons of high-octane aviation fuel. 3,000 gallons. On the bow of the boat, we had a 37 millimeter and a 20 millimeter. We had 16 rockets, 8 on each side. We also had, on the stern, we had a 40 millimeter anti-aircraft gun, and we had 2 turrets of twin 50s. The starboard side is the side that my PT turret was in, and then I was shipped overseas, but the PT boats were both the smallest and the fastest of the surface fighting craft to take part in the Second World War, with the advantage of a shallow draft to penetrate minefields and harbor defenses. High speed and maneuverability were to the PT's advantage. The motor torpedo boat answered the need for a weapon that would take the war close into enemy coastal waters, specializing in sudden, unexpected attacks on coastal shipping. The little PTs, regardless of their size, wreaked havoc among the larger ships with their tactics and crewed by lively individuals. The PTs took part in some of the most heroic exhiba in Navy history. When the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred, only 29 PTs were in service for the United States Navy. After the raid on Pearl Harbor, the PTs helped to ferry the wounded to hospitals. Squadron 1 remained at Pearl Harbor for the next 6 months until they were sent to Midway to help defend that island from the Japanese. At the beginning of World War II, 6 boats of Squadron 3 under John Buckley were in Manila Bay. They were the first U.S. Navy ships to see combat since Pearl Harbor. Because with the devastation of the Navy ships in Pearl Harbor, the United States was afraid to send their ships out. But we thank God that our aircraft carriers were not present at Pearl Harbor at that time. So all the PT boats over the Philippines were all that the United States had to throw against the Japanese at that time. PT boats were in more frequent contact with the enemy and at closer range than any other type of service craft in the U.S. Navy. I was on Squadron 16 and 42, and while I was on Squadron 16, we saw a lot of campaigns from 1943 to 44, and then from then on, we were in the South Pacific, and we saw action at Arias, Woden, Dutch New Guinea, Mindanao, Philippine Islands, Bruno Bay, Borneo. It also based for a time at Dredger Harbor, New Guinea, and San Pedro Bay, Philippine Islands. A part of Task Force Unit 70.14, Motor Torpedo Rod 16, was awarded the Navy Unit Commendation Medal for action at Mindoro from December 15th into 1945. I try to write all this down because it's really too much for my little mind to read. I'm 96 years old, by the way. Working on 97 real hard. After Pearl Harbor, the little boats with their mahogany hulls and decks would be about all the United States Navy could throw in the way of the powerful Japanese elements. After Squadron 3 they took MacArthur from the Philippines and expended their boats. They took, MacArthur was ordered to leave the Philippine Islands by the United States government because they wanted him to take over the ground forces coming to help win the war. And when MacArthur, he tried it out in a submarine. He thought maybe he could leave in a submarine. But he decided, since the bay was so shallow and everything, that he took a ride on a PT boat, and he decided that was the way he was going to go. So one morning, MacArthur, his wife, 5-year-old son, and other dignitaries of the Philippine Islands and other high-ranking officials, Navy, Army, Marines, they were ordered out of the Philippines. So PT Squadron 3 took him from there down to Mindoro, and from there he was flown into Australia. It was a 650-mile trip, and most of his entourage stayed below decks, but MacArthur stayed above decks. He stayed out all the time because it was a rough trip, and all the ones that were down below deck, they all got seasick. And there was a rumor out that MacArthur did too, but from my accounts, he didn't. And after Squadron 3 took him down there, they stayed there in that area until their boats were expanded and they could no longer fight. Because being made out of plywood, the salt water was awful heavy or awful hard on the hulls of the boats. So it was a constant battle to keep the bottom of the boats clean of barnacles and other debris from the salt water. That was a constant battle. In my PT, you're 69 and your mind starts to go. But in my turret, when a plane or you were trying to shoot a plane down, we'll say, you didn't aim your gun because every fifth round was a tracer. So you just pointed your gun towards the target, started to fire your gun, and it was like a light beam, really. You could follow those tracers right up, and with no difficulty at all, you could bring those tracers, your 50 calibers, right in on the enemy. We had two PT boats at one time was damaged. Well, they were damaged beyond repair by kamikaze. That was one of our biggest fears later in the war, was the kamikazes. The Battle of Salvo Island, which lay between the island of Guadalcanal, the Japanese sank. Well, the Japanese found out that the Americans had landed troops on Guadalcanal. So the Japanese got in there, they came down, and the Americans made a boo-boo. They had part of their fleet here and part of their fleet here. The Japanese got in between them, and they sunk 4 American cruisers, 1 heavy cruiser, 1 Australian cruiser. It was the most humiliating disaster since Pearl Harbor. And what did they do after the American fleet had to withdraw because they were afraid of losing more ships? That meant that the Marines on Guadalcanal were abandoned. They were pushed back almost to the water's edge. What did they do? They sent in 4 PT boats. They sunk several of the Japanese cruisers. In fact, they sunk the flagship of the Japanese cruiser and several other of the Japanese ships. The Japanese were afraid of losing other ships. They were afraid of PT boats because we carried 4 torpedoes. So they withdrew. After they withdrew, then the American fleet could come back in to the dock, and they could unload more men, more armor, more food, ammunition, and everything. And after several months, we finally won the Battle of Guadalcanal. But the last Japanese surrendered in 1947. They had withdrew to the mountain area, and it was 1947 before the last Japanese finally surrendered. The Battle of Midway stopped the Japanese advance, but the Guadalcanal, but The Battle for Guadalcanal campaign was the turning point in the Pacific War. The cost, let me put on my cheaters here. The cost of the U.S. Navy included 2 aircraft carriers, 5 heavy cruisers, plus 1 Australian heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 15 destroyers, 3 destroyer transports, and 1 transport, plus 650 15 aircraft of all services, including 90 carrier-based, and just under 5,000 sailors, including 130 Navy aviators and crews, and 92 Australian and New Zealand naval personnel, not including 49 Marines embarked aboard the ships, were lost. Almost 3 times as American sailors died at sea defending Guadalcanal as American Marines and Army personnel died on it. During the brutal 6-month campaign, the U.S. Navy abandoned the U.S. Marines for a total of 4 days. Rendova was the largest PT base established in the Pacific from which PTs could attack the Tokyo Express. General MacArthur returned to Corregidor on PT 373 on March 2nd, 1945, nearly 3 years from the day he had left the Rock in PT 41 on March 1942. If you ever remember seeing pictures of MacArthur returning to the Philippines on the newsreels and in the papers, it showed him with the landing craft and the plank would go down. He walked off of that into the water and up the shore. That was for publicity. They determined that it wasn't enough publicity for him to come in at a PT, land at the dock, and just step off. So that's why he came, because in all the battles, no matter what battles, PT boats were in every one. Now they were not only in the Pacific, although most of the movies were from the Pacific. They were all over. They were in the English Channel. On D-Day, we had 48 PT boats on D-Day. We lost 10 boats in that action. They were there to try to keep the airplanes away from the landings, keep the German submarines away, and the German E-boat, which was faster than our PT boats, although our PT boats could run circles around them. They were made from aluminum, not wood, and they had a big diesel engine. So that was our job, to keep them away, keep airplanes away, and what few submarines that the Germans had at that time. So at D-Day, and again, what do you read about? The landings. You don't read about the poor little PT boats. All you read about is the bigger ships and what the bigger ships did, although there was 48 of them there in D-Day. PT men in action that were killed was 331. Now, that included the killed in action and deaths in combat. Accidental deaths aren't counted, although we had a few of them. On D-Day, PT 199 had a full admiral on board during D-Day operations. So they thought an awful lot of the PT boats at that time. After the war, they took 120 123 PT boats in the Solomons. They stripped them, then they burned them. Because what were they going to do if they brought them back? They were already made out of plywood, and they don't last long in salt water. And all over the world, that's what they did. They would gag a bunch of PT boats up, and they would burn them. On one occasion in Volusia Bay, we had a pilot was shot down, and they asked for volunteers. So two PT boats. We went in to try to get him out. But in the middle of this bay was a sunken Japanese ship. And this pilot got on that ship and was hanging on the side of the ship. The Japanese did not attempt to kill him because they were using him for bait. So they asked for volunteers to go in and try to get him. The first run in was the heavy gunfire was too much, so we turned around and left. But we determined that he was going to be picked up. So we went in as fast as we could, picked him up, and got out of there, although the boats wound up with a few bullet holes, but thank God we got out of there safe and sound. If you would like to see a PT boat, you can go to Fall River, Massachusetts, which we're going to make a trip up there at the end of this month to see them again. PT 617 and 796 is up there on static display inside a big building. PT 617, I served on that boat. And I've been fortunate enough to go up and see it before, but we're going back up again to see it again. And there's some other, they also have the battleship Massachusetts and some other submarine. They have a submarine up there. They have a Russian missile ship. And it's at Fall River, Massachusetts. It would be well worth a while if you wanted to see a real live PT boat. Down in the film, or my mind. Well, anyway, at there's a PT boat you can get on New Orleans, on Lake Pontchartrain. PT 305 is down there, and you can actually take a ride on it. Now down in the islands, Key West, there was a PT boat back down there you could get a ride on too, but I understand that that was damaged in a hurricane and it's no longer in service. There are several other PT boats that are, the state of Washington has one, and there's a couple other ones around. A lot of them that were local were chopped up and used for fishing boats, diving boats, tour boats, and so forth, where you could get around. We go to schools to talk to the kids about World War II. I talk about the PT boats, the rest of them talk about the branch of service that they were in. And most of the kids know nothing about World War II. I tell them if we hadn't won that war, that they could be speaking either German or Japanese at this time if we had lost it. But we were determined that we were going to lose it. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. They've got to keep up on what things are doing. We have a group of veterans that get together in Bloomsburg on the second Thursday of every month. We have a breakfast. And there's probably about 30, 35 of us get together. We try it. I'm the last World War II veteran in our group, and I'm the only, well, like I said, World War II veteran. Most of them now are Vietnam and what's the other one? Pardon? Korea. That's why I got help. Where are the PT boats today? Today, roughly 18 U.S. PTs have been located. These boats are in various stages of repair and disrepair. PT 617, which I served on, and 796 are on static display in Newberry Hall, the PT Boat Incorporated Museum at Battleship Cove. Restoration of PT 617, when it was built, it cost $150,000. Our organization paid over $700,000 to restore it, and that's on static display. That was, and the restoration was completed in 1985. PT 796 restoration was finished in 1975 at a lesser cost. Those two boats are National Historic Register. PT 309 was bought by the Admiral Nimitz Museum in Fredericksburg, Texas in 1995 and is currently cradled near the Battleship Texas outside Houston. PT 658 was given to a group in Oregon in 1994. They are working to restore the boat. A Vesper PT 728 has been reconfigured to look like an Elko and is currently in Key West where it is operational, but that's the one I hear was damaged by a hurricane. I'm very honored that I was asked to come here and talk about PT boats. I hope you learned a little bit more about them. We were in closer action more often than any other Navy ship, but yet we still only got standard pay. We never got hazardous duty pay, never. I forgot to mention in the beginning, we also carried 4 torpedoes. And in the beginning of the war, 60% of those torpedoes were duds because they were made over from First World War. So the airplanes, the Ds, the destroyer escorts, and everybody that fired a torpedo had the same problem we did. After a few months when this occurred, they came out with the Mark 13, which was a smaller and a better torpedo. It always fired. And the torpedo tubes on the PTs were too cumbersome and heavy. So we did away with them and we put racks, like my fingers here, and laid a torpedo across those 2 racks. Then you would loosen the strap on the rack and the guy would push a button and the rack would open up and the torpedo would roll over the side, the engine would start, and with any luck, it would go straight ahead. Although sometimes they would double and come back. My helper.
The torpedoes that didn't function, what would happen
Huh?
when you sent a torpedo out that didn't function?
Oh, okay. I had that on my mind, and my mind just blew. Well, anyway, when you fire a torpedo, if you see something, you're welcome to come up after this and look at all the pictures. I'll answer any questions, or if you want any pictures taken, you can do it. PT boats at speed, their bow would be up like this. If you fired a torpedo or let a torpedo loose, it would dive. So you had to slow your boat down so it had an even keel when you released your torpedo. Other than that, it would dive too deep and it would go under the Japanese ships. But in the beginning, when the torpedoes were duds, we'd fire a torpedo and it would hit the side of a Japanese ship. They would hear this clang from the torpedo. So they would say, whoa, there's PT boats out there someplace. And they would turn all their searchlights on. Our job was we threw the smoke screen on and tried to shoot the searchlights out and try to get the heck out of there. And how fast did we go? In 11 seconds, from standing still in the water, in 11 seconds, I'll use mileage, we could reach 46 miles an hour in 11 seconds. That's pretty fast in water. I did tell about the gallons of fuel, yeah. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask me or anything that...
What was the day on the ship like?
What was
Regular day.
What was a regular day? Well, when you were in combat, the school kids would ask you, were you afraid? And I would tell them, you didn't have time to be afraid. You did your duty. You didn't think about getting hit. You didn't think about dying or getting shot or killed. You did your duty because you know it had to be done.
So you got up in the morning.
Huh?
What did it look like during the day?
What did what?
Tell them about a day on the ship.
Well, in the daytime, all our patrols were at night because the fluorescence from the PT boat going through the water, the wake was like a fluorescent tube to the Japanese planes. And in the daytime, we pulled into one of the nearest bases that we possibly could, or if we couldn't, we pulled in one of the shallow places and tried to get under the trees, and we had little nets that we would put up and cover the PT boat with and try to stay there as best we could out of sight. I have a question over here, Chris.
How many people in your crew?
We had, in the beginning, we had 9 men and 2 officers. And we all dressed alike. Somebody come on board, they wouldn't know who was who because we had cut-off shorts, no shirts, because it was extremely hot and humid. And our galley was very smart. Our galley wasn't much bigger than the top of this table. And we had a coffee maker and a hot plate. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or just sandwiches. And bananas, we tried to have bananas. One incident was when I helped one of my mates out. We were in rough water, probably about 20-foot swells. and the boat would go up over and dive down in the next one and right through the next wave and up, boom. Well, one of our head was right up in the bow of the boat on the left-hand side. All it was just a toilet and a little wash bowl. And you flush it, you pump the side of it. But anyway, he decided he had to go to the bath up to the head. I lay in my bunk because we were outworn in a combat situation at that time. And I had straps across me to keep me in my bunk. And he went up, fighting his way to get up there. And the boat went up, boom, come down through another wave. And pretty soon I saw him come out. Our hatchways were like a submarine, oval-shaped. And I saw him come out, crawl over from where the toilet was, and the boat went up and then down, and he slid right towards the bulkhead to go out to the motormax quarters. And I looked and I saw the blood trail in the water. And I thought, uh-oh. So I unfastened my straps, and when I did, I bounced out on a table right next to my bunk, rolled off into the deck. Our deck plates were real thin aluminum. And I put my legs around him and held on. I hit the panic button to get help down there. And we fed him sick bay alcohol, which was in little bottles, until we figured he wasn't feeling any pain. And then we put a splint on him, and it was about 3 days later we got him into where he could get medical help. I had an injury that happened to my hand with a gun, and I was put in the hospital. I also contacted jungle rot too. And I wound up in the hospital. This was about a month later. And he was still in the hospital. They said that he had his leg broke 3 times and they were trying to get it fixed up. When I left, he was still there. But what happened when he was sitting on the john, the boat went down, he went up in the air, he did a flip, hit his head on the aluminum sink, and it flipped him around, his foot right through the deck plate. And that's what snapped his leg off. And so it was hazardous even though you weren't in a combat zone. Any questions? Chris?
Is this on? Yeah. Do you remember a fellow PTer named Pete Knoble?
Yes.
You see
At
that?
one time.
He knows him.
Yes.
He's
at
my
one
dad,
time,
my surrogate father. I knew him my whole life.
He had a big 4x8 sheet of plywood, and he had a PT boat painted on that. And I was over there several times trying to find out what happened to that picture. Nobody seems to know.
I know what happened to it.
Do you remember seeing that?
I remember seeing it, and I know where it is. The problem is the family has lost the key to the room that it's in. They can't get in the stupid room.
To the room that it's in.
Yeah, but it still exists, and if I can get in, I'm going to come and bring you to go and look at it. Because I remember you wanted to see that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful picture, and it's painted by our artist from the park, right?
Yeah.
And I knew you remembered that.
Oh, thank you, Art, for that.
When you ran out of peanut butter and jelly, what did you eat?
Well, we run out of peanut butter and jelly. What did we eat? Not much. Yeah. Oh, I forgot that story. We ate fish. We used to fish. We took a hand grenade. Down. Boom. All the fish that was affected would come floating to the surface. So we would put 2 guys in the water with a basket, and the rest of them would be up on the deck with Tommy guns and carbines, keeping the sharks away from these guys gathering the fish. And we supplied some of the bigger ships with some fresh fish too. God. This is Chris. I have a story I'll tell you. How did we refuel? Refuel came to us in 55-gallon drums. We held 300,000 gallons. Can you imagine pumping 300,000 until we tried? There was always a race when we were out in patrol when we came in to see who got to the dock first to get refueled. And sometimes the natives would help us. And the natives had a habit of smoking at the same time. And we kept telling them, no smoke, no smoke. Fortunately, we never had an incident where the boat blew up. Yes?
What duties did you have when you weren't manning the machine guns?
What duty did you have when you didn't man the machine guns?
Sleep. We had to know how to fire all the guns. We had to know how to take them apart. We had to know how to put them back together, because after every patrol, the salt water was awful rough on the guns. So you had to be constantly cleaning them and everything else. And with the 20, the 37 was relatively easy to take apart and clean. But the 40 was a different story, because that was a much bigger gun. That was, you know what, a 40 is a boom, boom, boom. You see them in the movies with the longer barrel and just a boom, boom. And but we had to learn how to take that apart. We had to know how to fire the torpedoes, because if somebody was injured or killed and our duty wasn't called for, we had to fill in for that person. Yes?
Yes. Did you ever have any run-in with PT 109 and Jack Kennedy?
PT 109? President Kennedy's boat. He wasn't in our group, but he did something that we didn't do. We weren't supposed to do. At night, with our patrol, we were out on patrol, we were back against the islands, as close to the island as we could possibly get, because we didn't want the Japanese to spot us. He was out in the middle of the slot, and it was night, little hazy, and this Japanese D came right out of the dark and sliced his boat right in half. Yeah, and him and two of the members were killed. And he took one of the injured, I think it was the radio man, had it burned pretty bad. And he, with the strap around the injured man, Kennedy had the strap in his mouth, and they swam about 3-4 miles to an island. And the rest of the crew, they used floating wood and stuff like that, and they got in there. And after they were there for a day or so, they couldn't find any food, nothing to eat. So Kennedy looked at the chart, and he decided on Plum Pudding Island, which was about a 3 to 5 mile swim. And so they all got back in the water, and they swam over to Plum Pudding Island. While they were there, Kennedy and his exec, they used to take turns swimming out into the channel, hoping a PT boat would come along. It was usually a route for PT boats, but they never got in contact with the PT boat. While they were there, the natives came in and discovered, and there was a standoff between the natives and the PT 109 crew, but they said, Americans, Americans, and they gave the Japanese, Kennedy carved a message on a coconut and gave it to the natives. They took it to the Australian Coast Watcher. And then they came back, picked Kennedy up, and took him to the nearest PT base. And from there, Kennedy led them back to pick up the rest of his crew. Now, at that time, if your boat was damaged or sunk, if it was damaged pretty bad and sunk, you could come back to the States for a while. But Kennedy decided he felt bad about losing two of his crew. So he decided he would stay, and they assigned him to PT 59, which was a one heck of a dirty boat. And three of his crew members decided to stay too. The rest of them took a plane and went back to the States. And so they stayed and helped him clean up PT 59 until it was presentable, and that's what PT 59 is what he used for the rest of the war. Yes.
How did you deploy for a combat operation? Did you go out by squadron? Did you go out in pairs? How did that operate?
How did you get to the Philippines?
No. In
how we
combat.
get-
When
how
they go
we
out
get-
on a patrol, right?
How'd we get to the Philippines?
Anywhere. Did you go out in pairs? Did you go out as a squadron? You didn't go out singly, right?
When you were on patrol, were you alone or with other boats?
No, when we were on patrol, sometimes there were as many as 20 PT boats, several miles apart, and they would line up down the slot waiting for the Japanese to come down. And then we would sneak out as close as we could possibly get. As soon as we were detected, we'd release our torpedoes and throw a smoke screen out and get the heck out of there as fast as we could.
Did you sink any boats?
Oh yeah, yeah, we sunk a few boats and downed a few planes. We had several of our PT boats sunk by Americans, American airplanes, American ships, and they didn't know what a PT boat was, most of them. After the war was over, they put me on a destroyer escort. We never stood inspection on PT boats. I have a patch, PT boats. Well, my uniform's out in the car. I got on this destroyer escort, and the skipper, he saw, oh, you're a PT boat man. So guess who got all the crappy details? PT boat men. Because we never stood inspection. We were a family. At night, no matter where we are, we could take all our belongings and lay them on a table, and we get up out of our bunk, and after sleeping, everything would be there. My first night on a destroyer escort, I lost everything. I did. I put everything on the table and crawled up 3 bunks high, and I got up the next morning and everything was gone. Skipper couldn't do nothing. Oh, I had an incident with the skipper of the APD. I was on the 16th Fleet. I won't tell you what it was all about, but he put me on restriction. He would put me on the gangway, chipping it. This was after the war, as the rest of the guys were going on shore for leave for a day or so. And after about a month, the guy said, told the skipper, it's not right. He paid his time. You gotta let him go ashore. He said, no. So they went ashore and talked to the chaplain on the shore. The chaplain came on board the boat and talked to the skipper, and I was present. And the skipper of the boat, he said, told the chaplain from the shore, he says, look, he says, you may be Jesus Christ on shore, but I'm Jesus Christ on this boat. He stays. So my discharge charge came up several months later and I got out. That's the only way I got off the boat. But it had, I can tell you this much, it had something to do with one of our classmates. He was drunk, came back you came back by a boat to your bigger ship, a small boat, and he fell out of the boat, and we couldn't find him. The skipper made some awful, nasty remarks about it, and I was one of the first to reach the skipper. If they would have stopped me, I'd have probably hit him. So he put me up for captain's pass. Any questions at all? Anybody? Yes.
These were small boats. How
Yeah.
did you get them into the Pacific? You didn't drive them.
How'd you get the boats to the specific?
Oh, how you get the boats to the Pacific on a bigger ship? You loaded them up, usually 4 PT boats on the smaller ships, 2 boats, 3 boats, usually 4 PT boats on a ship. And then when they got over to where our assignment was, they would unload the PT boat, we would get on it, and it would be our boat. Yes. Any other questions?
Hi, I read that PT-109 was struck because it was sitting in the water in the fog at night with the engine running, and the destroyer, the Japanese destroyer, just honed in on the engine noise and rammed it. And so I wonder, when you were sitting close to the shore, hiding out, did you keep your engine running, or were they all shut down?
At night, did you keep your engine running, or should it be shut down?
No, we would, at night was our patrols were all at night. When we slept, it was in the daytime. And we would keep our engines idling. We wouldn't have them in, the propeller's gone, but the engines would be idling, so that in case we were discovered, we could get out of there in a hurry. Yeah.
Could the Japanese destroyer hone in on your engine running?
No, because there's 4 mufflers in the back, and you would send the sound of the motors into the water. You muffle the boat, the engines.
How did you steer the boat?
You steered the boat from outside. Some of the pictures there, you can see it. There was a steering wheel about this big around, and all the controls were here. Now, when we wanted to go fast, we would reach over 3 throttles here. We would pull them down or push them up, so they would. The motor Mac would set on the middle engine, 3 Packards, and in front of him was a display. And when we would move the controls, it would show up on his display, and he would reach over. There was a huge rod. He would reach over to each engine and bring that engine up to whatever speed. So he actually did he got the engines going. All we did was signal how much. And we all had a chance to run the PT boats. We all did at different times. The skipper and the exec, they were never over a lieutenant. Usually they were a JG, was our skipper. Kennedy was a JG until after the boat accident. They gave him PT-59, and then they gave him the rank of lieutenant.
Sir, is
torpedo juice?
I knew that was going to come up. I wish I'd have brought those papers along that I got from headquarters. We would not drain them entirely, take some of the alcohol out of the torpedoes and mix it with cherry juice or anything that you could ferment, and that was our alcohol. When I came out of the Navy, I was an alcoholic. Very, very bad alcoholic. I met a girl in Bloomsburg. I won't go into a whole lot of details, but I met a girl in Bloomsburg, and they were going roller skating, but they missed the bus to Berwick, which is 9 miles away. So I didn't have a car, but Virgil would, my buddy did. So I told Virgil, pull in, we'll see where those girls are going. I knew Ruthie, but I didn't know Dot. So they said, well, they missed the last bus to Berwick to go roller skating. I told Virgil, can we take them up? And he said, sure. So I told him, get in the back and we'll take you up. He had a Buick. And we got up to Berwick, went right on through Berwick. And we got up to Lamar's truck stop, which had a big lot. We pulled into that lot, and we were going to turn around and come back to Berwick. And when we pulled in there, I looked back. We had been talking back and forth. I looked back at Dot. I said, do you mind if I get in the back seat with you? She said, no. So I got in the back seat. Ruthie got up front with Virgil. And that was the first that I saw her. We stopped to get something to eat, and then we took them home because it was too late for skating. And it got to a point where I just couldn't get this girl out of my mind. And every place she liked to dance, she liked to roller skate, she liked to bowl. Every place she would be, I would show up. And my parents had moved the beginning of 1947 to California because my sister went out there and married, or she married a sailor from out there and had a baby, and Rob wanted to see the baby. So they were in California, and I was renting in a room in a boarding house. And it got, with the alcohol, I'm not afraid to talk about it. My wife and I were married, or engaged 5 times, all because I was drinking. We didn't have fights. Her mother was deadly against me. But I found out that her mother had a room to rent, so I rented the room there. I thought, oh, that'll be nice. But one night when I was supposed to be working at the carpet mill, instead I took another girl to the movies. Who should come in 3 seats behind us? Who's 3 rows behind me? Dot and Ruthie. And I didn't know they were back there. After the movie, it went out, and Virgil took me home in the morning at about 7:30 because I was supposed to be working till 7. And there on the porch was a suitcase with my ring on top. I told Virgil, I said, uh-oh, I've been evicted. So we loaded the stuff in the suitcase, or in the car, and we went to Bridgeport, Connecticut, and worked for Chance Vaughn Aircraft up there. I got on final wing assembly, and then they decided they were going to move to Texas. I didn't want to go to Texas, too hot. They said, well, we'll have a place for you to live, we like it, and we'll give you a raise. I said, it's too hot. So I got in the bus and I went to California, and on the way to California, there was a girl sitting in the seat next to me, and we got talking and everything. And I got to Oakland, where I should have got off because my parents were in Alameda, right next to Oakland. And as I started to get up, I said, well, this is my stop. She looked at me and she said, why don't we go into San Francisco and get a room? Whoa. So, San Francisco we went. We wound up in a cheap hotel with a bathtub full of beer and everything, and we were there 4 days. My money started to run out, the beer started to run out, then the girl run out. So I had enough money left to take a taxi from San Francisco to Alameda, and my mom and dad was living with my sister at that time, and the taxi driver took me to the place where my mother and father was living, and there was 3 steps there, and I must, at that time, I must have been a scurvy looking bum, because I knocked on the door, and my mom answered the door, and she looked down, and she says, can I help you? I said, Mom, it's me, Charlie. Well, she started to cry, and I guess I did too. And we walked in the living, we stood in the middle of the living room, hugging and kissing and everything, and I swear to God, this is true. I felt a hand touch my right shoulder, and a voice told me, you need help. I turned around and I looked and there was nobody there. I told Mom, I said, Mom, I need help. I want to quit drinking. I want to get a good job. Well, she sent me to a doctor that she had been going to for her nerves. And my brother and I were both alcoholics, although we both quit. And she said, well, I'll call the doctor and see if he'll see you. So she called the doctor, and he said, sure, send him over. So I went to him, and he sat down at a chair next to me, and he reached over, and he took my hand. And he says, son, he said, 19 years old, almost 20. He said, son, there is no magic pill I can give you to stop you drinking. There is nothing magic that I can do for you. But he said, I know there is something that will help you. And I looked at him, I said, he was still holding my hand. I said, anything. What is it? And he looked me right straight in the eye, and he said, the power of prayer. That medical man sat there holding my hand, and he prayed with me for about 10, 15 minutes. And I said, I want to see you tomorrow. So I went back tomorrow. It was the same thing. He sat there telling me there's no magic cure. And he prayed with me. He said, now I want to see you one more time. So I went back to him the next day, the same thing. He took my hand, he prayed with me. And he said, now, if you make any friends here, he said, and they try to get you to drink, find new friends. He said, if you want to go into a bar, tell the bartender what you're trying to do. If he's any kind of bartender, he'll set a glass of ginger ale or 7-Up, put an orange peel or an olive in it, and never know what you're drinking. And I left that office, and I never drank again. No. My wife and I were married 70 years, 7 months, and 12 days. The whole time we were married, we never drank and never smoked. She was on dialysis, and she died in 2019 on Mother's Day. Now, I would like to, this lady here, she's a veteran. She was in the first Gulf War. 7 months before she was to leave for Saudi Arabia, she had a little baby girl. She was married to my son at that time. And they came to us with papers because she said she signed up for tough duty, she was gonna fulfill that duty. So they came to us with paper and wanted to know whether we would take care of Amanda, which was just a little over 7 months old. And we said, sure, it was a grandparent's dream come true, believe me. And so we took her into our home. And the weekend before Christmas down in Virginia, at a base down there, as we found out, the next Monday morning they were going to be flowing to Saudi Arabia. So we loaded Amanda up in our van and we went down right outside the base and got a motel. And she got permission to stay at the motel on Friday and Saturday night. And she stayed at the motel. I have pictures of her where she was playing with Amanda on the floor, her little baby. Sunday morning, it came time for us to go home. We loaded Amanda up in the car, said goodbye to Chris. And as we pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rear view mirror, and it's something that hangs in my dreams all the time. Chris was standing in the middle of the parking lot, waving goodbye to us as we took her little baby back home, knowing that the next day she was going to go to Saudi Arabia. And we weren't, during war, we weren't sure she was coming back, but thank God she did. And we thank God every day. I've had 7 heart attacks. I've got 5 stents in my heart. And when my wife died, about a month later, I had a dramatic heart attack, real bad. And I wound up in the hospital, and Chris took me up with her. My son and Chris got together, and they said, why don't up there. And now at that time, I wasn't determined that that's where I was going to live. But I found out that I was living in the high rise on 3rd Street in Bloomsburg for elderly people. And while I was up there with her, she can tell you, I was bad. I didn't care whether I lived or died or anything else. And then I don't remember what happened one day or one night, but anyway, I said, Chris, I think if it's all right, I'm going to stay here. Now my son, we all get along good, great. And he worked in, he worked for the government, the Pennsylvania state government. He's an inspector. Well, in fact, he's in charge of the Office of Inspection. When anybody's got a license with Pennsylvania and they have trouble with him, he sends people out to inspect and find out what's going on. So I made up the decision that I was going to stay with Chris. If I wouldn't have done that, I would have wound up in a nursing home. And I had been in a nursing home for 3.5 months after I had my automobile wreck and then broke 5 ribs and punctured a lung. I wound up in a nursing home where my wife was. We were both in the same room. And nursing home, I don't want to go there. Huh? Do you have any questions at all? Any PT boats or anything?
Yes. I have a couple of questions, and again, thank you very much for your stories. It's phenomenal. And thank you very much. Thank you for coming here. What I don't think that we know, how long were you in the South Pacific, and were you in patrols? Did you have to go out every night on your patrols, or did you have them off time?
How long were you there? And did you have patrols every night?
Well, we had patrols probably 4 nights out of the week. And I was there 2 years. And I have 10 years Navy time. The last few years was reserve time. I was given my final discharge in 1954. I went in right after New Year's on 43. Any other questions? Way back.
How many boats did you have while you were there?
How many boats was I on? I was on 5 different boats. Wherever they needed a gunner's mate. Now, if no one, I invite you to come up. You can look at my pictures here. And if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you. And thank you very much. Very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, just a few closing remarks. I need to present a speaker gift for our speaker and have a few closing remarks. So let me give him our famous coffee mug first, and then I have a few things about our next speaker and a couple other things to close us up for the night. So just a few more minutes, everyone. So Charlie, first of all, thank you, and Christina for bringing your father. Charlie was our speaker in 2019 also one time, so he's an encore speaker. We're very happy to have him here once again. I know it was worthwhile for me. I saw him speak before, and I'm sure for you, those of you that saw him before, he usually goes to the air show every year, and I enjoy seeing him there every summer and talking to him as well. So I'll give you the, you already have one, but here's another one for you. Your collection.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Charlie, so much. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. So just a few more things to close us up tonight, and then I welcome you guys to, I'm sorry, a little name tag malfunction. So I welcome you to all come up in a few minutes to say hi to Charlie, but just real quick. All right, so our next speaker, September 7th, will be a former Rosie the Riveter, Dorothy Trait. She just turned 101 this summer. Yeah. So, and by the way, she's very active. She went for a biplane ride on her 101st birthday in the air, at a World War II vintage airplane for her 101st birthday. So she'll be here shortly. Thanks to all veterans, as normal. I always want to say that. Thanks to our board members, I always want to say that as well, and our other volunteers. I do have to remind you about our helmet committee in the back, because we do have bills and expenses every single month, and if you feel the desire to help us in our cause, we have the gentleman in the back with the genuine World War II helmets. We'll be happy to take your contributions. So I know you enjoyed the night. I think I can see it in your reactions, and thank you so much for being here. You make it happen too, all of you, for coming, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you.